and we're going to get our thoughts here on Geoff Collins. You've probably heard a lot of Geoff Collins talk throughout the week as he was fired last week after his loss. Georgia Tech obviously used to be a fantastic program. Ever since we've had the last couple coaches have been not great. And Geoff Collins comes in here, comes over from Temple after one season, being defensive coordinator from Florida, goes into Temple. Temple was, he was at Temple for 2 years, then comes over to Georgia Tech. Well, with Georgia Tech, he had a 10-28 record in 4 years under Collins. What went wrong? That's what I want to know first. Well, I'm going to go over a few things of what I think went wrong, and then Steve, I'll get your thoughts if you have any, and then we'll talk about some possible candidates or replacements because I know you have a few as well. Well, first, I think that what went wrong initially is that this is a very unique recruiting place for Georgia Tech, and I think he was set up for failure. I think initially from the get-go, and I think whoever comes in to this place might also be set up for failure. So I think there might be some adjustments that are needed. Well, first and foremost, I think Geoff Collins was set to come in to remove the triple option. He did that. He changed the offense. But when big drastic changes like that happen, you're going to run into a lot of issues. So he successfully got rid of the triple option. So I think in the future, Georgia Tech is in the right spot for that case. But that comes on a price of Geoff Collins. On the recruiting standpoint, Georgia Tech has some very high standards academically to get into that school. And a lot of that relies along mathematics. Not many other schools, if any, in Division I have those same kind of standards. They're in prime real estate in the pipelines of Georgia for recruiting. But not everybody of high caliber football players, 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits, are going to be at that high academic standard or be willing to remain at that academic standard while focusing on college football. Because usually those 5-star recruits aren't trying to worry about academics. They're more worried about making it to the NFL. Let's be honest. So I think that is something that needs to possibly be changed or removed even if they want to be able to compete in the ACC. Will Georgia Tech do that? That's an interesting concept. I don't think they will. I think that they are pretty strung on. If they haven't changed it yet, what makes you think they'll change it anytime soon? I think that's initially where my mind goes of what went wrong. And then let's just be honest. He was a top-notch defensive coordinator at Florida. Well, that didn't carry over to Georgia Tech. And that's another thing that went wrong. He had a high caliber level of talent at Florida. He comes into a team that he had to recruit and build himself, and it wasn't built. So even though that there were some things against him, there were some tough cards against him in his opponent's hand, the cards that he had in his hand weren't two aces. He didn't have a pair of aces in his hands. Okay, so I'm not trying to make excuses for Geoff Collins because I think that his time should have been – I don't think he should have entered the season as the head coach. I think the change should have happened this offseason as I do with – many of these coaches that have already been fired. And I think we are almost to the spot where I could stop saying that. I think when Brian Harsin goes this week, I think I can finally stop saying that should have happened in the offseason. So that's where I'm sitting right now with Georgia Tech. That's where I think went wrong. Now we talk about some certain candidates. A lot of people talk about Deion Sanders right off the bat. That's the first person that comes to everyone's mind because he has all these Atlanta contacts. He's known for the state of Georgia. I still like him in Auburn, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a move that one of those make. This is where I think, before I get your thoughts on this, Steve, I think wherever they go, this is me thinking that Georgia Tech doesn't change their recruiting ways. Like you still need those academic standards because I don't think that's changing. You need someone that is a big, well-respected person in the state of Georgia because you need to win those recruiting battles. And you are not going to win those recruiting battles unless you have a good reputation with the high schools in the state of Georgia and the surrounding areas, because who else is in your state? The best team in the country. Joe Klatt actually came out with a really good thing on his episode, one of these this past week, talking about the talent disparity of FBS teams. And he talked about how Georgia and Alabama, Clemson and Ohio State had 50% In 2021, 50% of the 5-star recruits went to those 4 schools. That's insane. That is wild. So if you want to try to find a way to get yourself into that mix, just even a little bit, you got to be well respected in the state of Georgia. I think that's where it starts. I think that's why the Deion Sanders talk comes in a lot. But you also need to find a way to have a coach that is really going to have to implement a brand new system, because I think Georgia Tech's system is completely flawed, offensive and defensive. I mean, with the removal of the triple option, the addition of the offense that was put there is not something that needs to stay. So I think you need a brand new coach, a guy that's just going to completely build this system from the ground up, not afraid to recruit, can really bring in his own system. You have a guy that could fit that bill?
I have a couple. One quick thing on Collins. At the time, it made sense because he was at Temple, a school that stopped playing football for a long time, came back. So he was a good program builder. So it made sense. They have to build a program. We talked about it when we talked about the Herm Edwards firing at Arizona State. You have to change the culture. You need to build a program. I am going to go a totally different direction than you went, as far as you kept talking about removing the triple option. Well, why? I mean, given and a lot of ACC schools have really high academic standards. So it's not like it's exclusive to just Georgia Tech. But when Paul Johnson was running that triple option, okay, maybe it didn't work. But the first guy that pops into my head, and I'm dismissing Deion Sanders. I'm dismissing all of the Georgia coordinators and coaches. I'm looking to West Point. I'm looking to Jeff Monken, because he knows how to find a competitive edge running an offense, building a defense, despite the handcuffs that are on him as far as acquiring the big talent. Deion Sanders, okay, yeah, he could bring in, 5-star recruits. How many 5-star recruits are going to meet the academic standards? And those that do, aren't they going to go to Stanford or some of the other schools, or Northwestern, that have really, really high academic standards? So I think you have to really go away from the big splash deal and can bring in a guy that can build a program. Monken even has Army throwing on third down, which I don't think has happened since back in the 30s. They've just been a running team. But I think you need to have that kind of a coach that's not afraid to do something different and recruit the players. Okay, are you then getting leftovers? I guess you can kind of look at it that way. There's going to be kids in Georgia that are high quality student athletes that are just going to get overlooked by the Bulldogs in Athens, because they're just not 5-star. Maybe they're 4-star or 3-star. And then we talked about the coach at Middle Tennessee State. I think Stockstill is another kind of a guy that's not afraid. Again, he's not getting 5-star recruits at Middle Tennessee State, but he found that receiving core, and he found his quarterback that, again, not highly recruited, but look how that's worked out for them. That's the kind of coaching that needs to be put in place at Georgia Tech, not the big flashy signing. Accept the fact that you are the bullied little brother of the University of Georgia. Just accept it. You're not going to change it. As you said, they're not going to change the academic standards. So, okay, bring somebody in that can work within that framework, and they can turn the program around. The ACC is a conference that you're going to have some up and down. I mean, there's Clemson, who's but there's always going to be some chaos within the conference as far as teams on the rise, teams, having to take a couple of years back to kind of restock. Georgia Tech can flourish in that environment, even with their academic standards, if they get not only a guy that can establish a culture, but who isn't afraid to do something different and not give in to all the pressure where you need to be just like Georgia. Georgia Tech will never be Georgia. Be Georgia Tech.
I'm with you. I like those picks. I'm still sticking around my thoughts though on I think it's got to be a Georgia guy or someone who's respected in Georgia. I think it's just got to be that, just because you got to find a way to compete in this ACC, and that means the recruiting window that involves the Bulldogs. I don't know if it has to be a coordinator from UGA, a guy that just keeps sticking out to me, and it's not Deion Sanders. I'm sorry, it's not. He's in a really good spot right now, so I don't know if he wants to make that jump to Power Five, but that's Georgia Southern's head coach, Clay Helton, and he comes over from USC. He knows how it feels like to be a part of Power Five. He's with Georgia Southern now. He took Georgia Southern out of the gun offense, which is basically the triple option, and they're looking pretty successful right now. Georgia Southern just beat Nebraska this year. Now, I don't know if that's something you want to be excited about. We'll figure out how that looks at the end of the year. But Georgia Southern, from where they were the last few seasons, have really improved. Clay Helton has really improved that team. I think he'd be a great fit for Georgia Tech. I think he's already got a pretty decent alignment in the pipeline. You have to make that thought. You have to make that assumption based on who he's brought into Georgia Southern. I think that could be a good fit. I think he could fit if he was ready to move up to the Power 5 level. I think he should take an interview at least. I think that's a good spot.
That's a great thought. And I had dismissed him because I didn't think that he would want to jump to a Power 5 school right away. But again, how often is the Georgia Tech job going to open up for a coach that's already has an established winning program that he's built there? Like you said, it's been a tough couple of years, but he's turned that program around. All of the cards kind of fall into place on that. That's a great call on that. Right. I really had thought that he would not move, but as you laid out the case for that.
With the expanded playoffs coming up, the Sun Belt's going to be a tough conference too. And if you can get to the top of the Sun Belt, then you might have a better shot at the college football playoffs with Georgia Southern than you would at Georgia Tech battling the ACC. So that's another thing that we're not really putting in the perspective right now, is that some of these group of 5 coaches might not want to leave. If they feel very happy with their position in Conference USA or the American, and they feel that their chances in the next few years to make it to the college football playoffs are better at a top-notch G5 school rather than a bottom P5 school, you're probably not going to get those coaches to move up. And that might be where some of that disparity gets a little closer. That would be kind of cool to see. I think the expanded playoffs are going to change college football for the better, not just for the aspect of having more teams in the playoff, but we're going to see, I think we've talked about it earlier, maybe some different transfers. Maybe those 50% of the 5-star athletes won't go to just 4 schools that could be in the college football playoffs. Maybe it'll get even moved down to 10 schools, maybe not 12, but 10. But hey, that's still an improvement. And you might see some coaches not say yes to move up to those Power 5 schools because they think they have a better shot in the conference they're in, therefore making those conferences stronger. So there's, I think, plenty of opportunities everywhere. Do I think Clay Helton would be a great addition to the Yellow Jackets? Yes, I do. But he may not move. You're absolutely right.